Hello, Nintendo here. I'm a clinical psychologist in Las Vegas and a hardcore Nintendo fan. And today I'm going to talk about something called time tracking. And this is something, it's kind of a nerdy thing that I get super excited about. But one thing I really want to point out that's really important about time tracking is it does not take extra time, okay? So yes, it's a habit, but it's a habit that once you start doing it, it gives you time. It doesn't take time away from you. It actually gives you time. It makes you more productive, and it actually takes away this feeling of boredom from your life. So that's really the miraculous thing about it, is it makes your whole life feel more like a game, more like a video game, more of a fun experience. And I'm going to get into three very specific aspects of time tracking to make it very simple to apply. So before I get into that though, I just want to explain a little bit about how this relates to video games. So if you've ever played a Zelda or a Mario game, then you'll know that anytime you stop playing the game, like if you set down the controller or you stop pressing the buttons or stop moving, in a lot of those games, eventually your character will just start to get bored. And it will actually, you'll see that on the screen, and he'll start to kind of he or she will look from side to side, and they might sit down, they might start snoozing and take a nap, kind of like pawing here and there. And they look really uncomfortable, right? Like they look really bored, really uncomfortable. They're not enjoying themselves. So that is a really good expression of what it's like when someone's bored, right? And so that really applies to our real lives, because when we have unstructured time and we don't know for sure what to do with ourselves, we start to feel the same way those characters feel when there's no action going on, right? So time tracking is something that gets our lives back into action, even if we're just wasting time or doing mindless activities, such as playing video games, okay? So the goal of this video is to try and help you find some really practical ways to practice and try time tracking. And I suggest you just try it for a few days and you'll see how much it changes your life. Okay, so the first thing I want to get into is just how to do it, right? So time tracking is super, super simple. Like, it's as simple as what it sounds like. It's just tracking your time. And so when you do it, I want you to think about all the time that you use as being in like a time slot or a time capsule, right? That starts and ends when a specific activity ends. So the really specific way that you would apply this is the second you get up, you go to your calendar, whether it's a paper calendar or an electronic calendar, either one, you mark I use an electronic calendar. So what I do is I mark on my electronic calendar the exact minute that I woke up. I usually round to the nearest 5 minutes, but you can do the exact minute. I like to round to the nearest 5 minutes. So I mark on my calendar exactly what time I woke up, and then whatever activity that I'm doing at that point, I write that as the event, right? So it might be whatever my morning routine is. Make coffee, update calendar, do emails. And so within one of those time slots or time capsules, I might have multiple activities that kind of fall into one general category of just getting up in the morning and my morning routines. So you might just say morning routine. Or you could get more specific. You could just say making coffee and meditating. Or you could have separate ones. But the key is to keep them as simple as possible. You don't want to mix them up too much. You don't want to combine your morning routine with work, because those are two distinctly different activities, okay? So the way it works is you mark it on your calendar, I'm doing this from this time, and then when you're done, you draw another line. If it's a paper calendar or if it's an electronic calendar, you create a new event that starts when the previous one ended, and then as soon as that new event starts, that's the new activity, okay? So the idea is you're only doing one activity at a time. Some of those activities, like I said, might have 2 or 3 or more things in them. So sometimes I'll combine driving home from work and then, changing into my casual clothes, which I call that dress down. So I might say travel, comma, dress down. But those are all kind of the activities that are basically like going home from work, or kind of encapsulated within that specific time capsule or time slot. And that's basically how it works, is you just track your time. And the idea is you want to do that from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. Now, on my electronic calendar, I don't create an event for when I'm asleep, because that's obvious. If there's nothing on the calendar, then that means I'm asleep. And then if I took a nap or something, which I pretty much never do, but if on the rare occasions that I go lay in the bed and take a nap, or I will confess there have been times when I was depressed and I just laid in the bed. If I'm not doing anything at all, like I'm not even like scrolling through online, whatever, then I'll just leave it blank and I'm in bed, I'm doing nothing. It's as if I'm asleep. So anytime I'm in bed or asleep, I don't put anything on the calendar. So it's kind of understood that that's just downtime. It doesn't need to be tracked, because if you're tracking everything else, then it's going to be obvious that the time that you didn't track is when you were asleep or in bed or asleep, okay? So that's the basic way that you track your time. And then ideally what will happen is on your calendar, by the end of the day, you'll have this like series of boxes, and each box is a specific time capsule or time slot where you've done something, and they're continuous, right? There's no gaps in between them. And the truth is, like, it doesn't have to be a productive activity. That's what's great about this, is you're just keeping track of what you actually did. So for example, if you're working on something like your homework for an hour, then you get the phone rings and you take a phone call for 5 minutes, then you want to end that event. You want to be super diligent about marking the fact that I'm no longer doing my homework. There's now a 5-minute time when I had a phone call or did some text messaging with somebody, right? So that's the basic way that time tracking works, is you're being super, super diligent and precise. You're being very precise about what you do and when you do it, from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed. All right? So that's the first part of time tracking. Now, the second part of time tracking has to do with the boundaries that you set within each of those time slots or time capsules. I use either of those terms to refer to them. So the important thing, so I gave an example about, okay, let's say you're doing your homework and then the phone rings. So that, taking a phone call should be a separate event, because you're not doing your homework when you're making a phone call. Unless it's a phone call related to the homework, right? Then it doesn't matter. Then you can include it in the homework and you don't need to make a new event. But what this does is it makes sure that whatever you're doing at the moment, that it has your full attention. And so the second point is about setting boundaries. So, for example, if I'm doing a challenging thing that I don't really want to do, or maybe I want to do it, but it's hard to do it, or it's hard to focus on it, right? So these are things like homework, or working on a paper, or doing work for your job, or just anything that requires you to focus and give your attention to it, and that might be hard to get started on. So the important thing to do with events like that is to set some rules for yourself. So, for example, for me, when I was doing my dissertation, I made certain rules, like I'm not allowed to check my email, I'm not allowed to do any text messaging or telephone calls. In fact, I would turn my phone off or set it to airplane mode so that even if someone did call me or text me, I wouldn't know. Turn off all notifications of the computer, the email stays closed, unless I needed to send an email for the dissertation itself, right? So the second point is really about getting really focused on what you're doing in any one specific event. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you don't have to always be that diligent, right? So right now, my event is I'm driving home from work, right? I'm going home from work, and if I weren't recording this video right now, I would just be driving. And if someone called me, I would take the phone call, and I wouldn't consider that like, oh, I need to make a different event, because it's not actually distracting me. Well, I guess technically you shouldn't take phone calls when you're driving, but the point is, as long as I don't feel like it's a distraction from the event, then I'm not going to worry about making a rule, like, oh, I can't take phone calls or whatever when I'm, traveling home from work. So it really depends on how much you need to eliminate the distraction from that event, but it's important to set rules like that so that when you do track, okay, I worked on my homework or I did this task for this amount of time, you need to really feel like you really did it, right? And so sometimes like working on a paper or something, it might be hard to get started. So if you set those rules, even if you're not totally productive, you're gonna feel better about yourself that you just gave it your full attention. So I know there have been times for me when I was working on a paper, working on my dissertation, when I had the phone off, I had the email off, I was totally focused on it. But for the first few minutes, I was just kind of looking through it and trying to figure out what to do and kind of getting frustrated and not sure what to do next. But at least I was just looking at it. And sometimes just like the mere act of just like isolating yourself with a challenging task can help you to start to figure out what your next steps are, right? So even if you just sat there for 15 minutes and then, kind of looked through the things that you need to do and maybe took a note or two about, maybe I could do this to get started. That's progress, right? So even if you did that for 15 minutes and then you ended that event and you did something else and went and played video games or whatever, at least you gave 15 minutes of it, right? And in that 15 minutes, you kind of absorb some information, and then maybe later at another time, you'll get an aha while you're doing something else about how you could go back and do it in a more productive way. Okay, but the point is, when you are doing an event that's easy to get distracted from or that's hard to focus on, you really want to have some clear boundaries about what you're not going to allow yourself to do when you're in those events, okay? And now the third point is not really a technical point. The third point is actually, this is something I was thinking about when I was at work today, because it's a struggle for me. This is the first 2 points, I've got those down, I'm super good at creating rules for myself and following them. Now the third one is really more of a mind thing, right? A mindset thing. And this has to do with making sure that you always keep a spirit of play about anything that you're doing, no matter how serious it is, right? No matter how important it is or how serious. And this is a constant challenge for me. I'm going to be honest with you. This is very, very hard for me to not get too serious about life. I'm someone who's prone to depression. So people that get depressed get way, way too serious sometimes about things. And, especially in the work I do, I'm a psychologist and people tell me about their problems, and sometimes it's very heavy stuff. And then even beyond that, sometimes I get stressed out. Like today, my boss was telling me that, we might have to do some things differently in my schedule. And then another coworker, the secretary, came and told me that we're now moving all of our charts into this thing, and I have to put some people's notes in, and it was like, oh gosh, this is just, I can't deal with this. This is overwhelming, right? And I found myself kind of getting super serious about my work. And I realized all of a sudden, like, well, I wouldn't be getting this way if it were a game, right? So like, I've been playing Super Mario Brothers Wonder, and sometimes they have these really tough levels that have 4 stars that are really challenging. And I thought to myself today, well, what if I just treat this like an extra star? It's just an extra challenge that is being thrown at me, but I can do this, like sometimes I get bored at work because I've been, practicing for a few years, and sometimes my work gets really easy. So, this is just a challenge. It's a more challenging thing. And if I struggle and make a mistake, that's okay. I can correct my mistake and move forward. Like, it's not the end of the world, right? So that's really the third point, is don't take yourself so seriously. Easier said than done. Much easier said than done. But it's a really important thing, because especially when you get focused on a task and you get really good at like tracking how you're using your time and you eliminate your distractions and you start working on it, That's a great place to be in. But once you get there, it's really important to keep a sense of lightness about it and a feeling of play. And try to imagine yourself as a forever child. You're still a child. No matter what kind of serious work you're doing, that you can do it with a detached mindset. Now, if you're doing heart surgery or even my work, yes, it's serious. So I'm not saying that, don't take serious things seriously, right? Like, I want a heart surgeon to obviously, be a little worried and take it seriously. So I'm not saying don't take things seriously, but I think you understand what I mean. What I mean is, if it's something that you could be a little less serious about and nobody would be at risk, then definitely dial it down, right? Dial it down and try to think of it as a game. Because ultimately, everything is a game. When people have near-death experiences, that's often an insight that they bring back, whether you believe in those or not. That's a very common insight, is this life is just a game. So, don't take it all so seriously. And then what I find is when I don't take it as seriously and treat it as a game, everything actually becomes a lot more fun. I enjoy what I'm doing more. I do it better because I'm not, adding this extra burden of concern and worry and anxiety, and things become lighter and they become more fun. So that's really, once you get the first 2 points down, that last one of just can be the most challenging one. And I forget it all the time. Like I said today, I forgot to just keep a spirit of play about it. But it's very important to do that. And but once you get that down, and you're tracking your time and you're keeping good boundaries from distractions, and you have a sense of play, that's when you're in the stratosphere and things are just really get into the flow. And I've been getting into that more and more each day, actually, and I'm really grateful for that. So that's it for today. Hope you have a wonderful evening or day or whatever it is when you're watching this. And hope you do something fun today. And remember that you are loved. And I will talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye.